Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Let me make sure I'm got my audio.
I hear you.
All right. How are you?
I'm good.
Give me about 1 minute. I've been on the phone, so give me 1 minute to clean up for a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's
No
put on a
problem.
nicer shirt.
People are logging in, so it's all good. Okay. All right. So this is our official good morning from Garden Club of South Carolina on our very first Zoom meeting. And this is a very exciting meeting because, as you know, this term we have chosen to garden for life, focusing on the relationships in our gardens and in our communities that foster life at all layers of our landscape. If you've been reading The Scoop, we have added a lot of information month by month about the little indicators that you can use to create life at all layers of your landscape, but particularly for our pollinators, because that is really what we believe is the crucial first step in fostering life. If you want birds, you need pollinators. If you want produce, you need pollinators. Everywhere you turn, you can point it back to the necessity of a pollinator and an herbivore. And so we did a special partnership this term with Riverbank's Botanical Zoo and Gardens, particularly with the Botanical Garden and Andy Cabe, the director, the horticulture director of Riverbank's Botanical. I have asked Andy to share with us his project. This is a project that we are co-sponsoring. So we are raising somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to support this project. This is our fundraising this year. This is our Pennies for Pollinators money. This is our 100 Heroes money. We're redirecting it to awaken awareness around Columbia First, in all of the medians, in all of the common areas, in all of the public parking lot plantings. We're converting wasted space, what used to be very simple, sterile landscapes, into living landscapes like Doug Ptolemy has invited us to do. So Andy is here to share with us today about the top 15 plants that they are testing and have become proven winners. He's going to share the top 12, and then we've added 3 at the end that I will talk about. So Andy, I'm going to let you take it from here. Are you with us? Oh, I got to unmute you.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, there you go.
Well, first off, I want to thank everybody for showing up today for this. This is definitely a new world for everyone. I did my first Zoom meeting like 3 weeks ago with my son for his school. So we're all learning this together right now, I think. So, you know, he's Zooming, he's taking a test on Zoom right now while I'm doing this planning with a purpose. So I've got 3 more Zoom meetings lined up today for other things. So it's been interesting, but it's a good way to communicate. And like Trish said, it's much better than just doing a conference call, and it's nice to see faces. First off, I just want to thank Trish and the whole garden club for allowing us to help expand our vision, which once started with parking with a purpose, where we were just going to renovate our parking lots. And I think a lot of you guys have probably heard me talk before over the last year or so. This project really kind of morphed accidentally. A lot of people approached us, different people approached us about helping out with different projects. And we just thought that this would be a great way to tie our pollinator vision into everything. And our original intent with Parking with a Purpose is like, we're going to start with our parking lots at the zoo and garden. And then over time, we'll expand it over the next 3 or 4 years. We'll expand it to different things. And then everything hit at once. And so we just ended up changing Parking with a Purpose to Planting with a Purpose because the time was right. And it's just one of those things we needed to strike while the iron was hot, while this was the hot new sexy topic in the horticulture world. So what we did basically was we brainstormed, came up with a list of good pollinator plants. This list is not inclusive by any means. And honestly, we came up with our 12 because we did this little brochure here, Planting with a Purpose, and we only had so much space in a brochure. So we picked these 12 plants or whatever. But this is kind of the start of it. We launched this right about the time the coronavirus was really hitting. There was a home and garden show in Columbia, and we set up a display there. And we were handing out these brochures and talking to people about it. And what we want to do is we want to have a multifaceted approach. I heard Trish, I got knocked off the internet for a few minutes, but I heard Trish at the tail end talking about, medians and highways and things like that. We want to look at those things. We want to look at municipalities. We want to look at homeowners. And we also want to look at things like home builders and try to encourage them to, change their landscape. And, as Trish was talking about the victory gardens, during, this self-quarantines thing, I haven't created a new garden yet, but I did remove the last Bradford pear in my yard. So that's kind of a success in and of itself. But that's the idea. Is my neighborhood was built about 25 years ago, and they use lots of things like Bradford pears and just a bunch of really junky plants. And so I'm trying to take my yard and trying to transform it into what I think a modern, practical landscape should be. And so it's kind of good. It's kind of like I'm following along with this whole process too. But so we did this brochure. We're handing it out to homeowners. We eventually hope to augment it a little bit and have some information that's geared more toward like I said, the home builders, and try to encourage them to make some changes, and municipalities. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire. Coronavirus kind of, we were picking up a lot of momentum. It kind of took us to a little bit of a halt, but when all this is said and done, we'll get back again. But so we came up with a list of plants that we've been growing for years, and just trying to and for this particular version, we were trying to find things that the average homeowner might find in a nursery. That's some of the limitation is the things that various nurseries carry. We grow lots of really weird pollinator plants and things like that, but we wanted to make it easy. It's real, it's easy to tell people what to plant, but it's hard for them to implement it if they can't find the plant somewhere. So without further ado, do we want to get started, Trish?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So this is probably, the quintessential, butterfly plant right now. The monarch butterfly is getting, lots of hype. It's actually being considered for the listing as an endangered species. Riverbanks has been a part. We helped implement a program called Saving Animals from Extinction. We just launched a monarch program for that with the AZA, the American Zoological Association. So they have programs for giraffes and elephants and things like that, and we just created one for the monarch. So we're really, and at Riverbanks, we're really trying to promote, because we have both a zoo and botanical garden. That's the perfect, and insects are kind of the perfect meld between both of those things. Really showing how the cycle of life and how it's necessary for insects, plants, and animals, all of these things to interact. And I think that a zoo and botanical garden is a great way to do it. And, you know, the monarch is, you know, it's a very splashy species that a lot of people recognize. So it was kind of our first one. And so Asclepius is a great one. We were just looking at our nursery at the garden the other day, at our Asclepius plants in the nursery. We saw tons of monarch eggs. We saw caterpillars on there.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And we started tagging monarchs last year. So you can get a little tiny tag, centimeter, about a centimeter round tag that's adhesive, that you catch a monarch, you put it on their wing, and it's got a number that you can enter into a database. And then as the monarchs migrate to Mexico, there are people down there trying to catch them and see. And so they'll catch a monarch in Mexico if it's got a tag. They'll enter it into the database. And, unfortunately, we haven't seen any of our monarchs we tagged. I think we tagged about 75 or 100 last year. I don't think any of ours were caught in Mexico, but it's fun. And the great thing about this is when we were doing this in the garden, people stopped. What are you guys doing? What's a 45-year-old man doing running around with a butterfly net catching insects? So that was cool, and it really sent a message to people. It was a good guest engagement experience, and people were super intrigued by it. I never would have imagined in a million years how much people would have been intrigued by it. So that's something we're really going to ramp up on this fall. But to attract monarchs, we need the Asclepius. The larvae feed on it, so it's super important. There are a number of different species, and we're starting to see more and more of those offered in nurseries. All right, aster, I mean, this is I think this one is either bluebird or Fanny's aster, the one in the picture, but the varieties don't matter as much right now. But when you go to Riverbank's website, we do have specific varieties listed that we've done that are tried and true. But butterflies and bees love them, and also when we were doing this list, we were trying to find attractive plants that were, there are lots of things that attract pollinators that may not be that attractive. They may be roadside weeds, but we were trying to find things that you could incorporate into a garden, to make it ornamental and functional. And that was the whole part of this purpose thing, is let's do something, let's create a beautiful landscape, but let's do it with the intent on giving it a little more of a purpose other than beauty.
And aster is a showstopper.
Absolutely, it is great for fall. And I love asters and mums as like garden mums as transitional plants, because they kind of help you carry that little period in the garden.
Right.
All your summer stuff is kind of done and fading, and your winter flowers, if you're planting pansies or snapdragons, things like that, before those things have really come into play, these are good transitional plants for about a month. And a lot of these asters and mums will go from September to November, depending on the variety. So you can get a really good transition period with these.
And these are a climbing variety too. I've seen them in great combinations with mandevilla, bougainvillea, clematis, so that you have year-round color and pollinator magnets.
It's a great thing to interplant with, like you were saying, Trish. You can, and you can, because we cut these things back in the winter, you could interplant bulbs, daffodils, things like that under those, and those will come up. And the great thing about interplanting is, the idea with daffodils and things like that, you're supposed to let that foliage, you're supposed to let it slowly senesce, slowly die back, so it can photosynthesize and build up the reserves for next year. But it looks kind of unsightly. So that's what's the cool thing about interplanting, is as you're letting that foliage die, you got something else new coming up. So you don't have to, it helps hide it a little bit.
Right.
All right, this is Baptisia. Baptisia has become a huge favorite over the last 20 years. It's super popular, Now, like I was talking about transitional plants, this is another good transition. This is the good transition from kind of winter into spring, summer. This is a late April, early May bloomer, mid-May bloomer. It's kind of got kind of a short period, maybe three, 4 weeks. But it really fills in the gaps when you don't have a lot of interesting flowers. There are beautiful, this is a popular plant that they've been hybridizing, creating new varieties of. They're beautiful purples, almost blues, yellows, pure white, and then every combination in between. But just great transitional plants, and the insects love them.
And this is a butterfly and bee magnet.
And,
so it's really good. You get a big bang for your buck on that one.
And one thing you'll see is caterpillars really love Baptisia.
Yeah.
And so,
oh, lost your audio.
As a pure gardener, you don't want to see, in our old viewpoint, we didn't want to see insects chewing on our plants, but sometimes it's a natural process, and if it doesn't affect the overall health of the plant, then I really don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, it in fact adds to the immunity building of the plant, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, and so the caterpillars come out, they eat all the foliage. Then when it gets unsightly, we cut it back, and then it shoots out new foliage, and everything's fine. The life cycle is complete. 20 years ago, we would have put some insecticide on it, and, to kill the caterpillars so they wouldn't come around and eat the foliage. But now the mindset and the paradigm has changed a little bit, and especially a garden the size of Riverbanks that has so much diversity, you can allow there are acceptable losses in a sense, or you can have acceptable levels of decimation on a plant, I guess you could say. That it's okay because something's chewing on that Baptisia. I can look over to the right-hand side and see something just as beautiful blooming its head off. So that's good. That's why it's good to have a diverse garden. When one thing is suffering, another is coming along. So we got redbud next. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So we have redbud next, and that's really become a favorite of mine over the last few years. In talking about new varieties, there are tons of new varieties of redbuds coming out with different foliage color, especially. There's some beautiful yellow chartreuse foliage varieties, purple varieties, variegated varieties, just and so that's the interesting thing about some of these plants is finding plants for dual usage or even more than dual usage. So we've got the flowers for the redbud. That's a great. The flowers are great pollinator plants, and a redbud tree is an attractive tree to start with. But then when you add some of these interesting foliage colors, it gives you lots of contrast in the garden. So it's really the perfect match of form and functionality. And it's a great small tree, native tree, and I think just about everything I put in here is native. And
we're close.
I'll go on.
We're close.
Or I'll put on, and I am not one of those people that says everything has to be a native plant. There are different schools of thoughts and different arguments. I think that there's a lot of value in native, but then there's also the argument of what really is native. Of course, of time, things travel and transfer and naturalize. Like lantana. Lantana gets a bad rap sometimes because people say it's weedy. I've never really found lantana to be weedy in Columbia, South Carolina. It's vigorous, but I tell you what, when we were doing the monarchs last year, that was the #1 plant that they went to. So we actually, because we're into the monarchs this year, in the whole monarch program, we planted a lot of lantana, and we're planting a lot this spring because we want to tag a lot of monarchs. So the next one is,
and we cut ours down to the ground in Charleston. We cut them all the way down to the ground at about January,
right?
And then it just goes like wildfire.
Absolutely, and I mean, and they give you so much bang for your buck. I mean, they bloom all summer long and keep blooming and blooming and blooming. So I mean, with the native.
Oh, we're losing you, Andy. Hang on, y'all. It's not you. It's Andy. I think his kid kicked him off.
The angustifolia.
Oh, there you
swamp
are.
sun-
Okay.
Had you lost me?
No, yeah, we lost you.
Okay.
So you want to go on to
Um,
Helianthus?
Yeah, I said a bunch of really important things for a minute there, but no. So the sunflower is great. This particular one is swamp sunflower, Helianthus angustifolia. It's a great late summer, fall bloomer.
Can't kill it.
Sometimes gets a bad rap for its aggressiveness. A lot of them get really tall and will flop over. But depending on where it's at, that's okay. And there are new improved varieties of a lot of these plants where they're selecting for particular characteristics, like maybe one that only gets 4 feet tall and doesn't flop over. But sunflower is a very broad term. This is perennial sunflower. This, the one we might stereotypically think of as, the big fields of tall 7-foot sunflowers with the big heads on them that you would get sunflower seeds from that you would eat kind of thing, or that you would feed the birds. Those are great too. Those are annual sunflowers and they have a particular impact. But a lot of these perennial sunflowers, number one, I like perennials because you only have to plant them once.
Right.
You don't have to worry about them over and over again. But sunflowers are very popular. And one thing about pollinators I should mention is lots of insects like to land on flat plants. So that's why a lot of these asters and sunflowers are good, because they like the flatter plants to land on. But this is a great probably 4 to 6 week plant right here, the end of August into September, and easy to maintain. All you have to do is cut it to the ground when it's done blooming, and you're good for another year.
Ready for the next one?
Whenever you are, Trish.
Okay, there we go. One of my favorites.
Don't see it yet. Here we go, cardinal flower. This is Lobelia cardinalis, the cardinal flower. Lobelia is a popular plant. There are lots of good perennial lobelias. There are a lot of nice annual ones, but just this deep red is so amazing. It's a great spring plant. If you've got moist, boggy soils, boggy areas, it's great for that. And I just think, just from the ornamental sense, I think just the vivid color is what's really attractive. It's not super tall, so it's great if you're doing a mixed border. It's great in the front of the border, and that's an important thing with thinking about the designing of some of these things. Is we're picking, like I said before, we're picking this palette of plants to help you incorporate into a garden. We're not trying to make it a roadside where you have we're trying to make it a garden, but a garden with purpose. And so that's when it's fun to think about how you group them, how you tier them. You have kind of small, medium, large if you're having a border. So lobelia is a good one kind of for the front of the border. It might be good to touch on a little bit now, Trish. I don't know if you were going to hit it later, but kind of how to design with these a little bit.
Yeah, I'll talk about that at the end.
Okay, that's perfect.
But yeah, one thing I do want to interject is you had mentioned a minute ago that this is not necessarily for roadside. This is really for mass plantings and showstoppers. And there's a fine balance that we are trying to walk here. So often when we try to create pollinator beds, they end up looking messy. And nobody likes messy, even when it's functional. Mm-hmm. It does not portray the master skills and the landscape designs that we as Garden Club members like to be proud of. So we are trying to establish a set that is so attractive that others in our community will be jealous and want to adopt. So when we're taking these 15 plants that we're going to show you today, it's really so that when somebody walks by your planting that you've created with these plants, they're like, oh my goodness, what are these? I have to have these. And we share the message, not just by giving the message, but by setting the model for the example of the message. So there's lots of other plants that you can add and enhance. And there are a lot of roadside plants that you said are also very beneficial. But these are the showstoppers. And not only that, they're also very, very adaptable to public plantings. Wouldn't you agree? Andy? Did I lose you again? He may have skipped off. We'll wait for him to come back on.
No, I'm sort of back. Do you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you.
All right. Yeah, I got knocked off for a second there. But yeah, touching on what Trish was saying is, you know, in a perfect world, you would leave these plants up after they, you know, in the winter after they die back, because that gives them areas to shelter.
Yeah.
But if you're, that's why I think it's important to mix these things in your garden. So you have one little patch of Monarda that you leave up. You've got other things that are looking good. So you're still offering, you know, spots for insects or birds or whatever to shelter. And just, you know, it's all about coming up with a happy medium and making best choices.
So talk about bee balm.
Bee balm. All right. So bee balm, Monarda, obviously the bee part of it, that tells you a little bit about how it's such a popular plant. Monarda is actually a great garden plant, and there are lots of wonderful garden varieties. You know, they come out with, you know, the traditional red, the pinks, the purples. This is another one. And the beautiful thing about this whole new pollinator craze is they're taking some of these plants, like Monarda that might typically be, or the sunflower that might be typically be a little taller and floppier, doing some hybridization and some selections to make them a little compact, or maybe even make the color a little more vibrant, or the flower look a little bit more attractive. And you know, that's important in the garden setting, and that's where we're helping find that balance between the natural setting and the garden setting, is just making improvements on, you know, some of these varieties. But we've grown a ton of Monarda. Monarda gets a bad rap sometimes in the garden because some of the varieties are apt to getting powdery mildew, but there are a lot of new selections that they're making that are more resistant to mildew. And, you know, and we grow, just going on a little aside, we grow a lot of roses at Riverbanks, and, you know, we grow a lot of the antique roses that are more disease resistant, but, you know, sometimes they'll still get black spot or they'll get mildew. And, you know, a respectable amount of that's okay. You know, you don't want a huge infestation, but, you know, I liken it to going to the grocery store and everybody's looking for the perfect apple that's glossy with no blemish in it. So what if it's got a little nick or a dent in it? You know, that's okay. If we didn't have to use as many pesticides to create that apple like that, that's fine. We do so much based on the physical appearance of something rather than the practicality and the functionality of it. And like I keep saying, I know there's a fine balance. All right, Picanthamum mountain mint. Wow, this is like the magnet in the garden for insects. You know, you can see on the bees. There are a number of different varieties of Picanthamum. The Picanthamum muticum, I mean, if you plant one, you're going to have plenty. But you know, the good thing is they're easy to pull up if they show up where you don't want them. And the great thing is that makes it easy to share with your neighbors for pollinator plants. This is one that we kind of included that we really liked as a pollinator plant that we want to encourage more garden centers to carry.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that I hadn't mentioned, is that's one, when we kind of get all of our ducks in a row with our overall program, we want to work with the garden centers to make sure that they're carrying the plants we need, and not only our local retail garden centers, but we want to work with the wholesalers that are local that these retailers buy from. So we have to have the supply chain from the wholesaler to the retailer to the consumer. And And especially when you talk about, doing major things like major highway plantings or, new home building, these people aren't looking for 3 of something.
Yeah.
They're looking for hundreds. So we've
Yeah.
got to, that's why we're really trying to get our ducks in a row and do our research and find out what the best of the best are that we can say are foolproof, reliable, low maintenance. And that's important too. If you're trying to encourage a homeowner, especially a new homeowner that doesn't have much garden experience, show them something that a perennial that's low maintenance, something that's other than just an Indian hawthorn shrub, that they're planting in front of the house, show
Right.
them some things that you can plant that you might only have to do something to once a year. It's not going to be constant maintenance.
And with mountain mint, it's been my experience that it's a very understated plant. People aren't going to notice it for its unique beauty. They're going to notice it because there are going to be dozens and dozens of bees all over this plant.
And it's one of those that is a very nondescript plant when it's not in bloom. Oh,
Yep.
look, this green plant. Oh, that's just a weed. And I think
Mhm.
it's important. And this is another one that is super impactful in a mass.
Yeah.
And Tricia's going to talk a little bit about that later, but there's just some plants that are better massed along. So rosemary, now this is one that just has like some of the ultimate functionality. Not only is it attractive when it's just in foliage, it's got this evergreen foliage, has a nice fragrance, has beautiful blooms, comes in whites too. It comes in prostrate forms that trail. It comes in upright forms. It comes in nice bushes. What I really like, just for a multifunctional aspect in your garden, is if you're someone who cooks, I really love rosemary. Not only can you just chop the leaves and incorporate them and other things, if you get a nice upright variety, there's one called barbecue I really like. It's an upright variety that has very straight stems. I love cutting stems, I don't know, 4 to 6 inches long, stripping the leaves off and using them as a skewers for like chicken. And you put it on the grill and it imparts a lot of that rosemary flavor. So I think that's part of the key too, is trying to tie in as many different aspects. Okay, not only is it a pretty plant, not only is it a pollinator plant, but it's also a culinary use plant. Any extra use you can find for something, I think broadens the horizons for getting it out there and having people plant it. This is one of the quintessential plants, I think, black-eyed Susan. There are a blue million different varieties. But, I mean, you want to talk about low maintenance. You want to talk about one of the most beautiful roadside, I say roadside weeds, but that's what it is on the roadside, in big fields of black-eyed Susans. That's one thing I remember growing up, is driving through the low country of South Carolina when I lived down there and seeing, fields of black-eyed Susans on the back roads. They make a great cut flower. You just grab a handful, cut them, bring them to your mom for a bouquet. And there are lots of great varieties that make good garden plants. There are some nice compact varieties, and they just bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom. And you just can't beat that. And so low maintenance, drought tolerant, you plant and forget about them. Salvia, there are a blue million different salvia. This was, some of the choices in here of plants depended on what I had a good picture of. So this is Salvia leucantha, and I really love this one because it blooms late summer into fall. Where a lot of your salvias you typically think of as being summer bloomers. But talk about a bee and even butterfly magnet. We cut a lot of monarchs off the salvia, especially the Salvia leucantha. This picture was actually taken in our rose garden where we caught a lot of the butterflies. But leucantha has nice purple. They're purple varieties. They're pure white varieties. There's some that are white and purple bicolor flowers. But just a workhorse in the garden. And I really like Salvia leucantha, this particular one, because I think the foliage is very attractive with that kind of glaucous green foliage. I think it makes a nice contrast with the flower. All right, Solidago. I know I keep saying roadside weed, but if you ever want to talk about, the tip
We lost you.
that everybody thinks gives you hay fever. Hold on. Got me now?
Yep.
See me? All right.
Yep.
So, goldenrod is the roadside weed that everybody associates with. They think it gives you hay fever, but it's really not. That's more of the ragweed. But this is a fantastic variety called Fireworks. It stays very compact. It's a very compact variety. It's 2 to 3 feet tall. It's not a flopper over. Great fall, and the bees love it.
And it's our state wildflower.
And our state wildflower.
Okay. So those were the top 12 plants that Parking with a Purpose, Planting with a Purpose is using. But I want to talk to you for just a few minutes, and Andy will interject to help me with you. And that is about how do you create a pollinator garden that is not only magical, but also low maintenance and multi-purpose. We've already talked about the combination of flowers. And if you are taking the landscape design course, you know that there are many, many ways to structure your plantings for a particular style. If you are a traditional gardener, then you're going to do a more formal style. If you are a romantic gardener, you're going to do a loose Magnolia Gardens kind of style where it's full and it's vibrant and it's kind of messy. If you're a cottage gardener, pollinator beds are very good for that. So the one good thing about the plants that Andy has given you today is that you can combine them. What does they say? Infinite diversity in infinite combinations. That's our Star Trek motto. And it's really great for pollinator gardens too. The more opportunities that you can do to put things together in mass, the better. But a lot of times, the biggest mistake that people make when they're creating a pollinator garden is to create these balls. And what I mean by balls are, it's like a clump here, and then a foot over here is another clump, and then 2 feet over here is another clump. And in between is lots of chocolate mulch or cypress mulch or pine straw. And I see the heads that are shaking no, because you know that the best cover, the best mulch is another plant. What we really want to do is create a corridor. Think about America 200, 300 years ago, when a squirrel could go from New York to Miami without ever touching the ground. The reason they were able to do that is because they had a connection corridor of plants and trees that they could touch one another. We have this image, this landscaping model that a bill of goods that we were sold by the mulch industry that says that a perfect yard has lots and lots of ground cover that looks natural, but it's actually artificial. What we really want to promote is vibrant, sheltering connection. Remember, Garden for Life means focusing on relationship, and relationship is all about connection. So don't be afraid to overplant. Don't be afraid to connect your plants in such a way that you're not using one plant here, one plant over here. You're actually using 5, 7, 9 plants all grouped together. 9, 12, 13 plants grouped together. And in between those pockets, those plant communities, what you are going to use are the fillers. But we call them, in pollinator garden, we call them the shelter plants. And the best plants for shelter These are the host plants that will create the filler space. Think of your garden pollinator bed as a potted plant. Everybody wants the thriller, the spiller, and the filler. Okay, sheltering plants are your filler, but they are also the key ingredient for sheltering and hosting the larval species. And they are also key for overwintering and nesting sites for not just our butterflies and our larval hosts, but also our bees. So if you had to choose 3 different grasses or even one grass that you could use, everybody knows that we're going to probably choose sweetgrass. And sweetgrass is Muhlenbergia. It's beautiful, it's pink, it's a showstopper. It has these feathery look upon it when it is in bloom. It's an easy plant to manage in public spaces and large full sun gardens because you can't kill it. There are lots of varieties, and you can choose the variety that you are most attracted to. It is one of the most show-stopping grasses, but I would caution you that this is an overused grass. The landscape industry has said, oh, we want natives. Well, we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck with sweetgrass. Everybody loves it. It's a heritage plant. It's what they make the baskets out of. So we're going to pop in all these. They're beautiful, but don't let that be the only grass that you choose. Another grass that is very, very popular is big blue stem grass. If you go on the Clemson website, on Carolina Gardens, Carolina Yards, you're going to see big blue stem. It is a native grass. It is easy to acquire. You don't want to acquire it from the wild. You want to acquire it from a native plant nursery. It gets very tall, and it can be the focal point in your garden. So when you create a pollinator bed, you want this native center focal point. And depending on the design that you choose, this could be the center, this could be the back of your pollinator bed. This can get from 4 to 7 feet tall, depending on the variety. Okay, and it would be, if you want to put it up against a fence and then have your pollinator plants proceed from that, perfect shelter opportunity.
And I just like to say about the grasses, Trish, is,
yeah,
you know, the grasses I think are great in wintertime too. We leave them up through the winter. A lot of times we'll cut them back in, you know, maybe mid-February or something like that, or March. But, you know, lots of them, you know, as they start to, you know, turn brown or bronze, they're very attractive. You know, lots of the flower heads will fade, but they'll still stay on there. So
right.
it gives you, it kind of even gives you an extra season. And so basically, you know, you might cut them out in, you know, late February, March, and you're basically, then it will start shooting back up. So, you know, you've got a grass basically for 4 to 6 months. I mean, for everything but 4 to 6 weeks of the year. You know, 11 months out of the year, you've got a grass in there. So
right. And in the fall to winter, it's going to serve multi-purpose. First of all, it's going to give you your shelter plant. It's going to give you that awesome Americana visual. You know, those amber waves of grain, that's what they're talking about here. It's grass in seed. And this is not in your slide, but the #1 grass for sheltering and harvesting for pollinators, particularly the skipper butterfly, is anything in the Poaceae family. These are the grasses that produce grain heads, Timothy grass, river oats, northern sea oats. These are the grasses, the wheats, the summer wheat, the winter wheat. Choose from the variety that is best suited for your region or that you are most drawn to. But in the fall, when we have our largest migration of the Gulf fritillary butterfly, you will see in winter that you will, I'll put it up there for you, Poaceae, Poaceae, Poaceae. It's in the chat. You will actually see the Gulf fritillaries sleeping in river oats because you can't see them. They camouflage. So you can walk through a mass planting of river oats and you won't even know unless you shake the plant that there are about 24 Gulf fritillaries sleeping in there. They're so well camouflaged. So that's another plant that didn't make it to the slide, but it's a great native plant. And then our last plant is our state grass. And Andy, you can talk about this if you'd like. This is Indian grass.
I mean, I can talk about grass all day long because that's a huge thing we love at Riverbanks because, you know, we love grass just in general because of the movement. You know, like Trish was talking about the amber waves of green. That's the perfect way to put it. You know, you just see the flowing grasses, you know, moving. And I want to just touch on one thing that Trish just said. You know, she's like, you know, these are the ones we picked, but this is not the end all to everything. We just had a few. We could go on for hours and hours with all this stuff. And, you know, but like I said, on the website, we're expanding our content, but, you know, we're looking for things that are recognizable to people. And, but, you know, do what works for you. And like Trish was saying too, like, you know, these grasses are great for shelter. But also if you want to leave your perennials up, you know, those are great for shelter too. That just provides a little bit. And you know, talking about there's this draw between the perfect manicured yard and then, you know, the wild mixed wildflower border with grasses and stuff. You know, if you have to, let's make compromise. You can have your front yard be this little manicured place if you got to have a little mulch in there, but you can have your backyard be your wild oasis. I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, sometimes you have to make choices. If you have an HOA that says you can't have your yard looking a certain way, you know, if you have to make compromise, say, well, you know, I'll do my perfect little cookie cutter front yard and my backyard will, you know, will be the end all of it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that concludes the PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do now is invite questions and answers. Now, this is going to take a lot of help from you because I am going to unmute you all and let you raise your hand so that you can ask a question. Now, if you,
hand button there, Trish.
What's that?
Isn't there like a little raise hand button?
There is a raise hand button. If you go to, the question is, can we find it for them? Okay. If you click on participants, it will let you raise your hand. It may also do that in the chat. Okay. Someone is asking, Andy,
yes,
if you can go ahead and type your question in on the chat room.
Way with 100 people, yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Go ahead and type your question in the chat, and then we will just go ahead and answer it. The first is Poaceae, and it's Poaceae. If you Google that, you're going to get a million different varieties. But really, it's your common grasses. If you just let them grow and let them go to seed, you will thank me. Okay. Another question is, can you give us the best species of asters?
That's like asking what your favorite kid is.
I know, exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. How about the climbing aster? Because I think that that has the biggest bang for the buck.
that's what Divaricatus, I think. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Aster Divaricatus, climbing aster. That's a good one. Then I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for, perennial border kind of asters, I would look for a variety called Bluebird. I would look
Okay.
for one called Fanny's aster, and there's another beautiful one called Purple Dome.
Purple dome.
Purple Dome. That's
Okay.
what we really liked over the last few years. But you know, it also depends on what color you want. Do you want a white? Do you want a pink? Do you want a blue? Do you want a purple? I mean, it's like I said, a lot of these are like the favorite kid kind of thing. It's you can't choose. But if you do go to the Riverbank's website, and I can't tell you exactly where right now, it'll be somewhere under Botanical Garden.
I'll send the link.
Yeah, but it's got some, especially of these planting with a purpose plants, it's got some more specific varieties that we like.
Okay. The next question is, some people have a concern about if I let my grass grow, what about snakes? I'm going to address that first and say, garden for life means garden for all life, not just the life that we think is warm and fuzzy. Another thing is that in my yard, snakes control my toad population. So I'm a fan of snakes. I don't want them to eat my chickens. I don't want them to eat the eggs, but I do believe that there's a place for everything. Do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I've been doing this at Riverbanks for 20 years, and we have lots of tall, scary places. And you know, the only poisonous snake that I have ever seen in my 20 years at Riverbanks in the Midlands are copperheads. And a lot of it is just you got to be careful when before you go cut back a bunch of grasses or perennials. Maybe get your rake and shake some things up a little bit from a distance, and if there's anything in there, root it up. But I found a good many copperheads and things like that over the years, but there's nothing that's ever attacked me. And that's the one thing about snakes in general is they just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
And like Trish said, I think the benefits outweigh the risks with snakes in general.
Okay. Now, I know that a lot of people are very concerned about snakes right around the border of their house. That's where we have most dense plantings. That's where we have a lot of pine straw. That's where I've seen mothballs used to good effect. It's an easy way to prevent snakes from nesting, because snakes love to nest in pine straw. And one of the easiest ways to prevent that is, number one, to air out that the dense planting. But if you have to have some kind of tool to use right close to your house or close to where children will play, mothballs do act as a good deterrent.
And they're good deterrents, but they're not going to be dangerous to the animal. It's going to, like Trish said, it's going to be a deterrent.
Yeah, they don't like the smell. They don't like the smell. The next question is shade versus sun. Obviously, most of the pollinator plants that we featured here prefer full sun. They prefer, 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. But will they grow in partial shade? Yes, they will. Andy, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, once again, it depends on the look you're going for. A lot of these things will grow in partial shade. You may not get the compact plant you might get in the sun, but you might still get a lot of the functionality of it. It might still flower. And a lot of these native woodland asters and even like the cardinal flower, those will handle some shade. There are plenty of grasses and sedges that will handle shade. So, there are lots of options. And once again, Trish and I together featured 15 plants.
Right.
There's
probably 1,500.
Right. And like when I do presentations on, I do one called my top 40 greatest hits or something like that, and I say any day I do this presentation, it could change. It just depends on my mood that day as to what my favorite is that day, I could do it 10 times over and have, 400 different plants. So this really was, this was a matter of really
Biggest
trying
bang
to
for the buck.
and focus on things that
Yeah.
were somewhat recognizable and maybe somewhat available.
Okay. The next question is the question that we always get when we do a plant presentation: deer. Deer resistance.
We're finding more and more deer pressure at the garden now. For the first 15 years I was there, I never saw a single deer. I think when I was there yesterday, I saw 8. And and especially now that we're closed, they're roaming a lot more, and there aren't 10,000 people a day to kind of run them off and annoy them. So I'm seeing a little more deer pressure. I tell people there really 2 good solutions for deer: either eliminate them, and some people might not want to do that, or move. I mean, hey, Trish can help. If you want to move, Trish can help you.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
No, the other thing is a deer-proof fence. If you are only growing, if you're trying to grow a pollinator garden and deer are a major factor, the only way that you're going to be able to grow anything is inside a fence that is at least 6 feet high. At least 6 feet high. And it has to be a 360-degree cover around your garden.
8 feet high.
Oh, yeah, 8 feet high. There you go. The other option is like Jenks Farmer. He has a large vegetable garden, and he has that inside a donkey garden. So he has like a 50 by 50 garden, and then he has outside of that, he has another 20 feet where his donkey roam. And that prevents the deer from coming in because deer do not like donkey. Sure, you can use urine sprays, you can use fox urine, you could use human urine. There are a lot of different home remedies, and good luck with all of them. If a deer is hungry, it'll go through any barrier, because our deer are overpopulated. That's why there's this big controversy with coyote being released now. Coyote are a great predator for deer. So are humans. So in the balance of things, it's a bigger question than we can answer today. But that's the best answer we can give. Andy?
It also just, factor in an acceptable amount of loss.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that depends on the size of your garden, how densely it's planted. Not everybody can have a donkey, so.
Right.
So you've got to, there's, an acceptable level of loss, and you have to determine that too. And a lot of it may be the placement of deer resistant plants, and how they're incorporated. But like Trish was saying, there are lots of methods, old wives' tales, things like that you can use. But things like urine or soap or anything like that, it's only going to be good for a few days or till the first rain, and then it's going to go away, and you got to repeat it over and over again.
Right. Linda, you had a question. I'm going to go unmute you.
Me?
Yes.
Linda Beckham?
Yes.
Yeah. I have found that Milorganite, which is an organic fertilizer, deters deer, because I just have droves of them in my yard. And this year I've had success. And Rhonda Brown, who's in the garden club, put me onto that. And I Googled, and sure enough, a lot of people feel like that. And seems to be working for me.
And Milorganite is, for those of you who are not familiar, Milorganite is made from sewage, basically.
Yep.
And it's just so it's probably the odor.
Yep.
Again, it's the same idea as urine.
Yeah, it goes away after about a week. It felt pretty strongly for about a week.
Right. So the question really is, if you apply it once, how long will it deter the deer? probably only as long as the odor is effective.
Well, so far, I can't smell it now, but the deer should
Right.
be able to. So anyway,
Okay.
listen,
Anybody else have a question? Thank you, Linda.
you're welcome.
I don't see anybody raising their hand. Okay, and then the last question I see is shade. You know, obviously, not all of us have the opportunity to grow in full sun, right? So the question is, what do we do for very shady yards? It's probably the topic of another video, but if you want to just give them some, you know, top 5.
I can't think of top 5 plants in general right now, but what I would say is, you know, that's a good opportunity to do things for shelter.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Good
for
idea.
sheltering things. You know, I'm trying to think of some good, right off the top of my head, some good shade perennials that attract pollinators. But I think just the density of planting could be beneficial, to have things to hide. You know,
Mhm.
you know, and you know, there are also things. You know, there are other pollinators besides insects or birds and things like that too. So we
Yeah.
haven't even really touched on the bird thing, because this is geared more toward insects. But you know, you could plant things with berries that attract birds that grow in the shade. Some of the hollies. But I think, Trish, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's really the perfect segue into another.
To our next video would be
Our
shade gardening.
We don't want to give our secrets right now.
Right, exactly.
Stay tuned to the next video.
Dallas. Is Dallas on? Dallas had a question. I just unmuted you. Dallas? You still with us?
Yes. How about dealing with rabbits? They've gotten a lot of my lower plants.
Wow, that is a tough one, and that's all right. Luckily, in the botanical garden, I don't have a huge problem with rabbits, but for some reason at the zoo, they do. And you know, I think that's where things like other predators come in handy. You know, if you have a, you know, that's where things like bigger things like, well, you know, some snakes can handle it, but foxes, other things like that. You know, I have a fox. Yeah, I've never seen a rabbit in my neighborhood, but I have a fox that roams my cul-de-sac. I saw him this morning. He just roams the neighborhood and lives in the woods behind my house.
And they're breeding right now.
Mm-hmm.
The foxes are kidding right now.
But you know, but rabbits are a tough one. I mean, if it's something you really love, you can do cages around it. But to me, putting a cage over something is just unattractive.
Yeah.
And
plant more.
Yeah, like I said, like with a deer, you know, plant more for an acceptable level of loss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Linda, you had a question.
I did. I wanted to ask Andy, which variety of salvia were you talking about? The one that you thought was so great? I didn't catch the name.
Salvia leucantha, autumn sage or Mexican sage.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and Tara?
Yes, thank you. For Andy, we have toured the Metrolina distributors north of Charlotte.
Yes,
and done some fun tours with their trial gardens, and they are those big distributors that distribute to the big box stores all over the East Coast. So how can Riverbanks help to influence more of the native plants?
Good question.
Because they are very, you know, they look about 2 or 3 years out, and we ask that question every time we go for these trial garden reviews, but they supply everybody, and that would be the end for the mass.
There are a handful of those kind of places. You know, it's really two things we're looking at: the places like Metrolina that do all the big box stores, and then your other big wholesalers that sell to the retailers, like your independent garden centers. And those are two things we're targeting. That's what we're kind of trying to figure out. So what we have to do as Riverbanks is grow a whole bunch of plants, a whole bunch of different plants, and find the ones that, number one, have the best ornamental value. They have to look good in a pot. And that's the important thing, especially at a big box store or even an independent retailer. If something doesn't look good in a pot, it's going to be a hard sell. And that's, you got to have something ideally that's blooming or that's something that's recognizable. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do is weed, no, that's the wrong word, but go through all these different plants and try to find the ones that could have the most mass appeal. It may not be the ones that I think are my favorite plants, but it's the ones that have the most mass appeal. And so that's what we're kind of trying to do now. And that's one of the next phases. But I will say in South Carolina in general, a lot of the nurseries in South Carolina have a hard time broadening their horizons as far as the plants they carry. So,
but demand.
We have to create a demand on the
Yes.
homeowner level, the retailer level, and then that has to go to the wholesaler. And trying to find out the proper order of that demand is hard. The wholesaler's not going to want to grow 1 million Monarda if it doesn't look good in the pot of the retailer, and
Right.
no homeowner knows what it is. So we're trying, and that's a very generic answer, but I don't have the good answer yet. But we've got to figure out the supply demand chain and those other little factors like what makes a good saleable plant in a nursery setting.
Okay. Do we have any other last minute questions? I know that Roseanne. Okay, Elizabeth, let's go first. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I started a couple of pollinator gardens, and I ordered bags of seeds from this company called American Meadows.
Mhm.
And they have, and it's very interesting, they have a bag that you can plant for different areas, and they have several years worth of blooming to go through it. So the first year you get annuals, the second year comes up with more perennials, and then so forth and so on. What do you do with them after they die back? Do you cut them back so that the rest can come up? Because right now I'm getting ready for a bumper crop of little sunflowers, and that's going to, some kind of sunflower, and then that's going to die back, and I don't know what's going to come up after that. So would you just leave it to die back, or do you cut them back?
If it were me, I would, in February or March, cut it back, run the lawnmower over a lot of these things, and that's just creating more space for new stuff. And really, that kind of gives you the survival of the fittest, and helps you find out you're creating new space for things. And over time, if you're continuing this over time, you'll really find the things that work best. You'll find the plants that really want to be there. And it may be that every 3 years you overseed again with something new. But I think definitely in the perfect world, you would leave all these perennials up till right before spring, to create those habitats. Then you could cut them back, mow them down. If you have the ability to burn, you could burn it, whatever it takes, the natural cycle, just to create more, more space.
Okay, we have one last question, and that is coming from Roseanne.
Yes. I have read a couple of articles encouraging us to plant milkweed for the monarchs, and I wondered what you thought about milkweed. Is that hard to find, or?
It's getting easier to find. Like I was talking earlier, the whole monarch crisis is becoming something that's very evident in the pollinator crisis, and monarchs are kind of the perfect image for the pollinator crisis. Excuse me. And you're finding more and more milkweed, and the more milkweed we plant, the more monarchs we can attract.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing.
So add that to our pollinator garden.
That was the number one
That's what we
plant
started
on the
with.
list, was
Yeah.
Asclepias.
Butterfly weed is the same as.
Yes,
Oh,
milkweed.
I didn't know that milkweed and
Asclepias.
butterfly weed the same thing.
Yeah, and the reason that we gave you the botanical name for
Okay.
each one of the plants is because so many of our plants go by different names. Milkweed, butterfly weed, some people call buddleia butterfly weed, butterfly plant. And that's why it's always good to ask for the botanical name.
That's why You
Right.
you could talk to somebody in France or Russia or Germany,
Right,
and
right.
you could say Asclepias tuberosa, they would know exactly what you're talking about, no matter what language barrier, because it's all Latin.
Right.
Okay. All
There are a couple things that I want to share with y'all before we close. Number one is please go to the website, the Garden Club of South Carolina, www.gardenclubofsc.org. In the members only section, or actually not even in the members only section, in the public section, there is a learn tab. And in that learn tab, almost every week, we are adding other handouts, new handouts, new options. We're going to put this list on that learn tab so that you can download the information that you need for these plants. The second thing that I want to tell you, and this is a plug, is I'm going to put this book up. This is a book. I hope you can read it. It's called Butterfly Gardening with Native Plants. It's probably coming up on the camera backwards.
No, it's fine.
It
It works.
Butterfly Gardening with Native Plants. It's written by Christopher Klein. He is out of the Ohio Botanical Garden. And the only reason we're doing this one is because Andy and I haven't published the book yet for South Carolina.
That's right.
But it's coming, I'm sure. So that is a great book to show you butterfly planting plans. Okay, we are working at the state level to create planting schematics. And when I say schematic, what I mean is something that looks like, let me show you. Something that looks like this.
It's like a recipe almost.
It's a recipe, okay? It's like, okay, take these 12, 15 plants. How do you combine them? Remember our Star Trek rule, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. So we're going to give you some options, but we want you to show us what you're doing with these plants. Mary, I'm going to unmute you, and I want you to talk about the awards for pollinator gardens.
Oh, we have so many awards, but our great award for Garden for Life, Pollinator Award, everybody applaud our president, please.
Oh, thank you.
Because that is where the funds came from for all of these gals' gardens. Wonderful awards were written. But we are going to get those, the clubs themselves know that they've already received their check, $150. We even had one group, I think the small group, Trish, that tied. And at our meeting that the committee, I don't judge them, the committee was judging them, came up with a tie.
Yeah.
And Madam President said, well, I guess they're going to break my bank because they both are not going to split that fee. They're each going to get $150.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful award. And I can't wait for next year that we'll have even more to sign up for that.
And all the awards are on our www.gardenclubofsc.org website. The winners will be posted tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm still tweaking the list, but the winners will be posted tomorrow. Okay, so ladies, gentlemen, garden club members and gardeners, thank you, thank you, thank you. You have my deepest gratitude for joining us today. I see a lot of thumbs up. Thank you, Andy. We sincerely appreciate your expertise and your knowledge.
No problem.
One last statement. We have recorded this meeting. So many of us were not able to share it or tune in, but we are going to post it on our YouTube channel, and we're going to link it on our Facebook page and our Garden Club of SC.org website page. So if you're not logged in and you're not on our Facebook page, please, you are missing so much. Somebody said to me the other day, I'm so sorry that you're not able to do anything. I'm like, what are you kidding? What are you talking about? We do everything at least 3 times a day. So tune in to our Facebook page, tune into our Instagram, log into the Riverbanks page. It's riverbanks.org, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, riverbanks.org. Amazing information that we have ready to share for you. So for now, we're going to sign off. Be safe, get some sunshine. It's the best remedy for COVID. And please plant a pollinator. Please garden for life. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.